Hello and welcome to 3 Minute Gaming. I'm Nathan, and today I got a bunch of reviews for you in this backlog blitz. So if you just got an Xbox recently for the holidays or whatever, you might not know that it is actually backwards compatible with a ton of Xbox 360 games. How many exactly? More than 650. Holy crap. It's worth mentioning that not only do these new series consoles play them, they also update a lot of them with 4K, HDR, and some even get FPS boosts up to 60. Wild stuff. But that's not the point. The point is I was a big 360 baby and played way too many games on that system, and there is a ton of overlooked and underrated 360 games that made it over the back compat list that you should be checking out. So today we're going to look at 5 overlooked 360 gems that you can play today via backwards compatibility on your Series Xbox. Isn't technology wonderful? Our first game is Prey, and no, this isn't the Bethesda/Arcane 2016 Bioshock-esque shooter. This is the one made by 3D Realms, aka the dudes that made Duke Nukem, way back in 2003. Prey is almost more horror game than retro shooter, at least the first half of the game. Tommy, a Native American who wants to take his girlfriend off the reservation for a better life, is abducted with her and his grandfather by aliens, hell-bent on harvesting the human race. While the shooting feels fantastic and every weapon is unique and really weird and interesting, the true craziness comes from the game's surreal portal, perspective, and gravity puzzles, which are absolutely mind-bending and predate Valve's Portal game by several years. The bottom line is that Prey is a completely underrated shooting gem, a first-person horror shooter packed to the brim with fantastic and crazy ideas that almost all work over its short 5-hour runtime. It's also worth mentioning this game is in rights hell, so the only way to legally buy it digitally now is on the Xbox 360 back compat. So hey, play it and then rub it in the face of all your friends and enemies who can't play it because they don't own Xboxes. That'll show them. Our second game is Lost Odyssey, and asks the question, if you were immortal, how would that change things? Would you become stoic, withdrawn from society, or perhaps use your immortality for your gain, via wealth, pleasure, and fame? Lost Odyssey is a JRPG with an impressive pedigree. It is written by the legendary Hironobu Sakaguchi of Final Fantasy fame, with music composed by the equally legendary Nobu Uematsu. It's a turn-based JRPG that closely emulates the greats of the PS2 era. The story follows Kaim and a group of immortals he assembles over the course of the game in a world rife with political turmoil and war. However, despite its grand plot, Lost Odyssey is defined by its smaller, quieter moments that dig into the heart of existentialism, the balance of life and death, and family. The bottom line is that Lost Odyssey doesn't necessarily break new ground when it comes to being a turn-based JRPG of this era, but it does everything from that era fantastically, polished down to a sheen, paired with some excellent art design, absolutely fantastic music, and a really engaging turn-based battle system. If you love JRPGs and somehow overlooked this one, you will need to remedy that ASAP. Our third game is Condemed Criminal Origins, and nowadays first-person horror is much more prevalent. It really took off with PT, Outlast, and Resident Evil 7, but long before those games, Monolith, the guys that made the Fear franchise, tried their hand at making a first-person horror, crazy, homeless, drug addict game with Condemed Criminal Origins. And yes, the game about being the homeless might sound crass, but that is kind of what you do in this one. You play as an FBI agent who is framed for a series of murders that he was investigating, forcing you to go underground, literally, and investigate murder scenes while holding off a venerable army of drug-addicted murder hobos and the actual killer who wants you dead. The game's melee combat is pretty basic, but hinges on having a whole host of weapons you can pull from the environment, be it metal pipes, 2x4s, fire axes, and so on. The horror and combat segments are broken up by investigation segments, where you follow blood trails, document evidence, and piece together the MO of the real killer, so basically you're trying to solve this mystery while also being hunted by a bunch of crazed drug addict lunatics. The bottom line is Condemed was a release game for the 360 and does look it, but don't let the somewhat chunky graphics deter you. It is a fantastic horror experience dripping with excellent sound design and atmosphere, and its visceral melee combat keeps things tense throughout. If you enjoyed horror games like PT and RE7, or enjoyed tense psychological cop dramas like the movie 7, you are going to love Condemed. Our next game is Enslaved, Odyssey to the West, and here's a fun fact: Ninja Theory has only ever made 2 games that were profitable, and this one was not one of them. Which is a massive bummer, because Enslaved is a phenomenal third-person action-adventure game that feels a bit like a mix of God of War and Uncharted. Loosely based on the famous Chinese story Journey to the West, which the original Dragon Ball was based off of, you play as Monkey, an incredibly acrobatic brawler with moves that would put the Prince of Persia to shame, who is paired with Trip, a young woman who needs escorting through a post-apocalyptic robot-filled world. But despite being post post-apocalyptic, Enslaved looks gorgeous with an overgrown tech aesthetic that's still visually stunning. This is paired with some basic but fun melee combat and a ton of traversal puzzles and excellent storytelling. The bottom line is Enslaved is absolutely a hidden gem, if only for its insane facial rendering software and a knockout performance of Monkey by industry legend Andy Serkis. Like most Ninja Theory games, their stories and visuals are usually interesting enough to overshadow some of their rougher edges. So if you've been looking for an excellently written and acted third-person action-adventure game, this one is one of the best. It also particularly looks good with the auto HDR, for the record, as it is vibrant and the colors really pop. It makes the game look almost modern. And the last game I'm going to talk about today is Spec Ops: The Line. Now, if you saw Spec Ops: The Line's cover on the Xbox store, you probably thought it was a pretty generic military shooter, based off of its cover art and title, which is what the game actually wants you to think because it's about to pull the rug out from under you. I mean, come on, this cover looks like basically one of the billion military shooters that were squirted out on the 360 after Call of Duty 4 made a bunch of money. But like I said, Spec Ops is anything but ordinary. Set in Dubai being overrun by desert storms and host to a rebellion against an occupying American platoon, Spec Ops dives into the hell that is war in some horrific ways and brings some of that responsibility on the player for engaging, playing, and killing as part of this monstrous event. The bottom line is I don't really want to say too much more about Spec Ops because I don't want to spoil it. I do have a full review if you'd want more info. That review is also intentionally spoiler free, but I cannot oversell the fact that I think that this is one of the best games of this generation, particularly of the climate of games during the 360 PS3 era, and as fantastic analysis and critique of war games as a medium while also being a solid shooter. If you enjoy horror games, games that make you think, or just engaging third-person shooters, get out there and grab Spec Ops: The Line. And that's all I have for you today when it comes to the backwards compatibility Xbox 360 hidden gems. I want to stress further that I feel like this is a fantastic feature. Probably one of the hidden best features of buying an Xbox console today is that Microsoft has done a really good job of not only adding backwards compatibility, but providing some fantastic upgrades to those games. There are more great Xbox 360 backwards compatibility games that I'm probably going to make another video on soon, but for now, I highly recommend picking these up if you haven't already, and enjoy playing some 360 games in 4K. But that's basically the end of the video. Again, thank you so much for watching. Have you played any of these games, other 360 backwards compatibility games that are your personal favorite that you'd like to see on this list? Please let me know. I am always looking for games that I missed from the 360 era, so send them on over. But regardless, go out there and play some 360 games.